Well, because most of the American news media cannot deal with the possibility that everyone in the Trump White House is lying to them most of the time, or even all of the time, they reported as fact that Donald Trump left Canada in the middle of the night last night and flew all night from Alberta back to Washington, D.C., quote, to deal with the rapidly escalating conflict between Iran and Israel. The New York Times reported that as fact. The reason Donald Trump left Canada in the middle of the night was to deal with the war between Israel and Iran. The New York Times could have said, White House officials say that that's the reason Donald Trump left Canada in the middle of the night. And that would be a big difference from just stating it as a fact. And this is not just a semantic point. Donald Trump is a pathological liar who told over 30,000 documented lies in his first presidency, and everyone working for Donald Trump in the White House is there because Donald Trump knows that they are all willing, ready, and eager to lie for him about anything, including why he left Canada in the middle of the night. Because we know Donald Trump has no idea what to do about the new war in the Middle East. We don't know. We really don't know why he left Canada. It might have been for the reason that the New York Times thinks is a fact. And it doesn't really make any difference what time zone Donald Trump's in or what countries he's in when he's trying to do something he doesn't know how to do, like deal with the situation in the Middle East. Donald Trump has absolutely no mental capacity whatsoever to deal with a situation like this. And Donald Trump is the laziest person ever elected to the presidency. And I'm still willing to grant that it's a possibility that Donald Trump left Canada for the reason the New York Times takes to be fact. But it is an interesting coincidence that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Canada right after Donald Trump left. And Donald Trump knew exactly when President Zelensky was arriving. President Zelensky went to Canada to ask the G7 allies for more help fighting Vladimir Putin, who Donald Trump called a genius when Vladimir Putin launched his war on Ukraine. And Donald Trump, he didn't have to hear a word from President Zelensky because he left Canada in the middle of the night. Donald Trump has all but publicly admitted that he has no idea what to do about Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, except to, in effect, encourage Vladimir Putin to just hang on long enough and the United States will just abandon Ukraine. Meetings in the Situation Room in the White House are usually secret. No one had any idea that there was a meeting in the Situation Room in the White House when President Obama and his national security team were tracking the Navy SEALs who were on their way to capture or kill, and it turned out kill, Osama bin Laden. But today, while there was a meeting reportedly going on in the Situation Room, the Trump White House was telling the world that Donald Trump was having a top secret meeting in the Situation Room about the situation in the Middle East. This is the same president who ignores the president's daily brief that is about situations like this as they develop, including all of the president's daily briefs that lead up to situations like this. And those daily briefs are something that every other president has consumed in full. On his flight back from Canada, Donald Trump tried to compete with Utah's Republican Senator Mike Lee for the meanest reaction to the assassination of a Minnesota state legislator and her husband, and the attempted assassination of another Minnesota state legislator and his wife. Donald Trump was asked if he has called the governor of Minnesota, as is customary for every previous president of either party in situations like this since the invention of the telephone.
Hi, I'm Nicole Hockley from Sandy Hook Promise. The shooter who murdered my son at Sandy Hook Elementary School was able to shoot 154 rounds in approximately 4 minutes. 5 of those bullets hit my 6-year-old son Dylan, and in an instant, he was gone. When the shooter paused to reload between magazines that day, 11 children were able to escape. It's agonizing to wonder if Dylan might still be here with me today if the shooter hadn't had access to a highly lethal weapon. Easy access to these highly lethal weapons by people who are at risk of harming themselves or others have helped make gun violence the #1 cause of death for America's school children. Every moment our lawmakers delay action, more children's lives are at risk. So please, sign our petition now, demanding Congress take action to restrict the sale of highly lethal weapons and prevent more school shootings. Thank you.
I could be nice and cold, but why waste time?
That's another Trump lie. He could not be nice. And he has proved himself incapable of being nice by not making that phone call, along with hundreds of other not nice things he does in a typical week. We have never had a smaller mind in the White House than Donald Trump's. We've never had a more petty mind in the White House than Donald Trump's. And as far as Donald Trump wasting time, no president's time has been less serious than Donald Trump's time. Donald Trump has spent much more time on golf courses than he has spent reading anything related to his job as president. Donald Trump is so incapable of reading that his director of national intelligence has tried to come up with video presentations of information on an iPad that mimics Donald Trump's favorite propaganda news network. But this time, Donald Trump's heartlessness has been outdone by Senator Mike Lee. Mike Lee appears to be in an agonizing mental struggle with how to be a human being. Here's a photograph of Mike Lee last night in the Senate that does not give the slightest visual indication that Mike Lee understands a word that Minnesota Senator Tina Smith is saying to him about just how horrible his social media postings have been about the assassination and attempted assassination of those Minnesota state legislators and their spouses. Mike Lee is not well. And Mike Lee does seem obsessed with mental illness to the point where we have to wonder whether he is suffering from mental illness that leaves him projecting mental illness on others. Mike Lee tweeted, "Marxism is a deadly mental illness." He tweeted that as his explanation for why the man now charged with murder and attempted murder in Minnesota did what he did. Mike Lee decided, without evidence, a couple of things. One, that the shooter is a Marxist. And here's what's wrong with that idea, according to the defendant's roommate.
I was a Trump supporter, voted for Trump. You like Trump, I like Trump. Nobody's happy with the government. Everybody's happy with this, not happy what this politician does or that politician does, but you don't go on a shooting spree. It's just, that's why I hate even talking about it, because it's so crazy.
And when Mike Lee says that Marxism is a deadly mental illness, he's making it very clear that he has no idea what mental illness is. He also doesn't appear to know that Marxism does not exist as a governing doctrine in any country in the world. Marxism is a long-dead philosophy that explains nothing about life in the United States or death in the United States at the hands of an accused assassin whose roommate says voted for Donald Trump. After Senator Smith confronted Mike Lee more than 24 hours ago, Mike Lee did nothing. Mike Lee did not delete his tweets about those murders and attempted murders. Mike Lee is suffering from some very bad coverage in local Utah media. Salt Lake Tribune reports that Mike Lee, quote, has averaged more than 100 posts a day on the platform over the last several months. 100 tweets a day is not healthy. No United States senator actually doing the job of senator would have the time for 100 tweets a day or even 10 tweets a day. So there's something seriously wrong with Mike Lee. He can't possibly be coming close to doing the job of United States senator. The very first tweet that the very sick Mike Lee issued after those deadly news bulletins from Minnesota was, "My guess is he's not MAGA." That was Detective Mike Lee's guess about the shooter. He's not MAGA. We now know that the suspected shooter voted for Donald Trump. We know the suspected shooter is MAGA. But why would anyone need to guess immediately after the shooting like this about the politics of the shooter? The shooter was on the run when Mike Lee was guessing that he's not MAGA. Mike Lee didn't care about the two issues that mattered the most at that time: sympathy for the victims and pursuit of the shooter. Why would a United States Senator need to guess about the shooter being MAGA or not being MAGA? No Democratic senator tweeted, "I guess he's MAGA." But when you're a Twitter junkie like Mike Lee, out of control, tweeting 100 times a day, you're guessing about a lot of stuff. Mike Lee.
Excuse me, have you heard of this company?
Yes, I've seen you guys on the street before.
We are going to come surprise you and pick up your junk.
Are you serious?
Serious.
Proudly proclaims, his Senate website proudly proclaims that he is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and served a 2-year mission for the church in the Texas Rio Grande Valley. There is nothing in Mike Lee's religion that told him to guess about the shooter's politics. Mike Lee did not come close to living Mormon ideals in his Twitter madness about these murders and attempted murders. During the weekend manhunt for the suspect in this murder and attempted murder case, Mike Lee decided to blame the Democratic governor of Minnesota for the murder and attempted murder of Democratic state officials by calling it, quote, "nightmare on Wall Street." He also posted, quote, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." And today, 4 days later, Mike Lee deleted those tweets after Minnesota's senior senator, Amy Klobuchar, complained to him directly about his tweets. But Mike Lee, who has obviously not turned to religion for guidance in this situation, refused to apologize to anyone for any of his tweets.
I don't think this is a person who's used to being confronted. I don't think he's somebody who's used to being challenged, and I think he didn't quite know what to do. I approached him from a position of respect and wanting him to understand what I thought, and he didn't have that much to say.
He didn't even apologize to you in that interaction?
He said, how many times have we heard the words that go something like, I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, or I'm sorry if you didn't understand what that's not, in my mind, taking accountability or responsibility for your actions. And so I can't paraphrase exactly what he said, but that was the gist of it.
Mike Lee is a disgrace. He is a disgrace to the Senate. He is a disgrace to Utah. He owes the voters of Utah who sent him to the Senate an apology for his ugly tweets, his perverse tweets. He owes the nation an apology. He owes Minnesota an apology. He owes them an apology for tweeting 100 times a day, an apology for not doing his job. Mike Lee is not up for re-election until 2028, so he is very likely to continue handling this situation in the most cowardly possible way, which is running away from reporters, forcing his staff to hold up the stuff they're carrying, to try to block the camera's view of Mike Lee like he's a gangster.
A former Tesla engineer reveals how to cool down any room in just 60 seconds. This engineer from Texas has become an overnight sensation.
There it is. The gangster leaving the courthouse shot. Try to block the camera. Before Trumpism took over the Republican Party, a United States senator would be censured for what Mike Lee did. The United States Senate would unanimously pass a resolution censuring a senator who publicly joked about assassinations and attempted assassinations. Last night, Jon Stewart shared a story about Mike Lee when Jon Stewart was lobbying for benefits for 9/11 first responders.
We had a team of Feel Good Foundation and a team of first responders with us. firefighters, cops, other people. One of the cops had been in the first tower when it collapsed, right? So all these first responders are going around the table, and they are sharing their stories to try and get Senator Mike Lee to support this bill that's going to provide life-saving coverage and money to the victims of this terrible terrorist attack and the illnesses they are suffering since then. When the one cop says his story about being in the tower that collapsed and the aftermath, when he told Senator Lee about that experience, Senator Lee smiled and said, I bet you've got a lot of stories. Of like what? Spring break? Like, what are you talking about? We met a lot of people in Washington. Some were hopeful, some of those meetings. Some were upsetting meetings. That was the only meeting where we all walked out and looked at each other and went, what the f is wrong with that guy? The only one. I say this for context, for why I use Senator Lee as the avatar for the insanity of this moment.
Mike Lee, the avatar for the insanity of this moment.